And although human rights values are pillars of the European Union, human rights education is missing from educational initiatives for locals and refugees alike. Yet education is a powerful defense against the rise of discrimination. At Secondary, we work on the forefront of the refugee crisis in Europe. Every day, we witness violations of people's dignity and human rights, from arbitrary camp lockdowns that affect their freedom of movement, to violent pushbacks by coast guards that block their right to claim asylum, to endless waiting in isolated camps with no access to social, economic, or cultural life. Our students often ask us why Europe hates them. We wouldn't make animals live like this, they say. We try to explain that what's happening in Europe is not a refugee crisis, but a crisis of values. At Secondary, we've been thinking about how to address this, how to foster the attitude that allows people to stand up to and challenge degrading treatment, despite it constantly putting them down. Molly, when you were talking to us about Tostan, you said something that stuck with me. You said you need to awaken their motivation to aspire. And we often only talk about human rights when violations take place, but knowing you have human rights and responsibilities towards them can be a life-changing learning. In today's conversation, we'll learn about the inspirational side of human rights work and how it can transform communities and empower people to advocate for themselves. As a little reminder, we'll have a Q&A at the end where you can ask Molly some questions. If you have questions throughout the talk, please put them in the chat box and we'll get to them at the end. So thank you very much for celebrating Human Rights Day with us, Molly. We're super excited to speak to you today. To begin, could you tell us about the key components of the Tostan model?
Thank you so much. I cannot see myself. Am I on the web?
Yes, you are on and we see your slides.
Okay. I cannot see myself. So anyway, I will go ahead and talk, and I'm not sure who I'm talking to. But first of all, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this afternoon on this very special day. Thank you to Secondary for inviting me to share Tostan's experience with all of you on this day of International Human Rights. I find it only fitting to start our discussion with a voice from one of the women participants in Tostan's Community Empowerment Program. I wish she could have been here, but because of COVID, I was not able to invite anybody from the village to come and do this session with me, but I would have loved to have done it, because truly it's when you hear the voice of the people that you understand the power, the transformative power of human rights. So I will start with a poem by a woman who went through the Tostan program, and after learning about human rights, she wrote, "We, the women of this village, have a new friend, a wonderful friend who is righteous and just, and who now guides us on the many paths of our lives." Who is this friend, you ask? The name of our friend is human rights. And to think we knew nothing about her before, nothing about all of these human rights. Did you know that all people are born equal and have equal rights? That we all have the right to be protected from all forms of discrimination? Yes, we women also. We have the right to vote, to be elected, the right to work, to health and education, the right to be informed, to voice our opinions, the right to be protected from all forms of violence, the right to have a family and to marry the person of our choice, the right to organize and belong to organizations, the right to own land. These are just some of the human rights that have changed our lives and our ways of being in our homes, in our neighborhoods, and in our country. Before, we felt unsure and we felt oppressed. We walked with our heads lowered. But now our heads are held high and we are ready to move forward with confidence. We want everyone to know that human rights are a woman's best friend. So, although this poem was written by one village woman, it really reflects the reactions of thousands of women, men, and youth, because everyone is involved in the Tostan communities where we do our program. And when they participate in the program and they learn human rights, I really think it has made a huge impact in everyone's life. Let me see how I go into the next slide. So it wasn't always like that. We originally did not put human rights into our program. Our organization, Tostan, was founded in 1991, and for many years, 6 to be exact, we implemented a non-formal education program developed in collaboration with villagers in Senegal, West Africa. And it was a program that when I was living in the village, we were requested to do a learning program for the villagers who had never been to school or who had dropped out at a very young age. And this was mostly for women and for girls who had very little education, could not read or write. So it was only after having implemented our program in hundreds of communities that what I call really a joyful revolution took place when we introduced special sessions into our program in 1996, so some time ago. It was a time when I was looking around to find information on human rights, I had trouble finding it because not many people were working with human rights in communities at that time. So we introduced human rights into our program in 1996, but not in a legalistic or academic way at all, not by working on articles, but rather using vocabulary and a methodology that really helped people who had never attended formal school understand in their own mother tongue, and that's really important. You said, Dina, that we had done our program in 22 national languages. Mm-hmm. And that was probably one of the most important aspects of our program, that they could really understand and see that human rights were actually universal principles for promoting human dignity for all people. And hence Tosan's vision, dignity for all. And we contribute to that. Mm-hmm. We contribute to that through our mission, which is to implement our program each year in hundreds of communities, but also by sharing important aspects of our program with other civil society organizations and other activists working in Tostan and in Africa and in other countries also. We've had people from many countries come to our training center, 48 actually, in an effort to create a movement for the promotion of respect for human rights, which we believe and we hope will one day lead to dignity for all people. Currently, we are implementing our program in 5 West African countries, although we were previously in Mauritania, Somalia, Somaliland, and Djibouti for 7 to 8 years. And the program is implemented by well-trained community facilitators who are always of the same ethnic group and speak the same language as the people of the community where they actually live for those 3 years that they're doing the program. All of the country coordinators, the supervisors, the village facilitators, and the administrative staff are from the country of implementation. And we are very proud that our program to date has reached more than 3,500 communities in Africa. Communities like this one that you see in front of you. This is a village in central Senegal, which is very similar to the remote and resource poor communities where Tostan has worked and works today in Senegal, Guinea, Guinea-Bissau, Mali, and the Gambia. So when Tostan is invited into these villages, and when we were invited into this village over 20 years ago, there was only one well in the village, no electricity, there was one school classroom, there was no health center. The village is far away from a paved road, and the people live mainly on the crops they harvest every year that they sell and eat. And this is really the situation in most of the communities where we work in Africa. So what we do, okay, I've got to learn how to, is to organize classes in the same way that villagers organize to discuss, for centuries they've organized in this way, in a circle, under the tree, in the village center, to facilitate dialogue. We facilitate dialogue and engage people with one another, talking about issues that sometimes they don't talk about in their daily lives. We have a session guides, and there's a facilitator. You can see him in the middle there, leading a discussion around new information that people may have never heard of before or want to know more information on. And sometimes we do that within a classroom space because some of the topics we discuss in these classes are very sensitive and sometimes taboo. Mm-hmm. So the classes always start in Tosan with the first year, which is called the COBE. In Mandenka, this means preparing the field. And this is a year where people really do what I was just showing before. They are discussing orally. There's no reading and writing during this year. They discuss, first of all, and that's really, really important, to start with what is their vision for the future of their community? What do they want? How do they see their community in 5 years? How do they see their community living in well-being? What is their dream community? And they actually draw this. This is just one picture of a community that has shared their vision with the rest of the class is sharing with the rest of the community. And here is another picture of a village where you see that a lot of the things they want are dreams of many of the villages where we work. And they include food and markets and water. And even you see there's a little ambulance in the picture. And even they put stoplights in front of the house. And decent housing. They want good farmland, markets, places for the children to play, a clean environment. This is really critical to do this, to start with their vision. What it shows is that Tostan is there to listen to people, to understand that their vision of well-being may be very different from other people's vision, either someone who lives in a big city, even if they're in Africa, or if they live particularly in Europe or in America. Our vision of well-being could, as you can see, might be very different. And so it's very important for Tosan and for the people in the community to hear us ask and want to listen to them talk about their vision and say that, we are here not to impose our idea of what well-being is and tell you. It's rather to help you and support you to achieve what your vision is. And we also emphasize the importance of listening to their values. And if they're going to achieve these goals that they're seeking, the goals that they're seeking, what are the values they want to maintain in that process? And this is just a picture that was drawn that shows the different values people often come up with. Peace and security is usually number one. Family is top of the list. Of course, health is so important. Well-being, education, learning, participation, and then, of course, the values of family and unity are so important. And I want to emphasize this. A lot of NGOs that we discuss with in our trainings talk about how they have not really ever done this, to talk about values. And I think that for people who are working with human rights, this is a very important discussion to have with the people that you're working with. Because, as you'll see later, it really makes a difference when you get to human rights principles. Because as you can see from this list, there are some that really are aligned with human rights values and principles. So we also do, during that first year, the COBE, which means preparing the field. It's an agricultural word in Mandenka. So we spend 3 months at least on human rights and responsibilities. And I will get into that a bit later. But this is where we talk about as we achieve our goals, we need to organize. And how do you want to organize? We ask them how they want to organize in a way that includes everybody, in a way that it will be successful in their community. They know their community best. And what are the guiding principles for us working together collectively? And this is where the human rights come in. Discuss the different human rights, and they do each one individually. We spend at least 2 to 3 hours on each of the human rights principles, the 19 that we present. They also do a collective problem solving process. We do that because as they discuss human rights and they look at whether they have violations of human rights in their communities, if they decide that these human rights really do correspond with their deeper values, let's say the right to be free from all forms of violence, and they see that there are violations to this human right in their community, we look at how can we overcome this problem? How can we plan, identify what the deeper issue is, what the problem is, what the root problem is, what is a potential solution? How do we plan the solution together? And then we do it, and then we evaluate, have we solved the problem? They really all find this very important step in the process of promoting respect in the community for the human rights, because it really helps them to come together around how they need to plan and organize around working with the community together. We then, during that same first year, we have a 4-month period where we use human rights practically. And in the hygiene, if everybody has the right to a clean environment, we need to learn about germ transmission. We need to learn about prevention. We need to learn about good practices for health. And we need to learn also about those practices which can harm our health. And so these are all very interconnected. Someone came and asked us once, can you just do the hygiene and health module? We just want to teach our communities hygiene and health. And we answered, there's no way we can teach hygiene and health without first doing human rights. Because people come to agreement that health is a human right, and we have responsibilities. That's something I failed to mention in the beginning, that we never do human rights without talking about, okay, if we have human rights, what are our responsibilities? And around health, there are a lot of responsibilities. You have a responsibility to vaccinate your children, to go for pre and postnatal consultation, to make sure that you have decent health services and advocate for those either in the community or at the district level. So all of those things are brought up within these sessions. And it's so important that they've gone through that human rights thinking and discussion first before discussing the health issues and also the collective problem solving issues. So it's, what I'm trying to say is that it's sequential and it's all interconnected. And then years 2 and 3 is also important in this process of empowering people. It's by giving them literacy skills if they don't have them, project management skills, because of course, one of the goals of every community is to improve their economic condition. As I said, these are resource poor communities, and so they desperately need income generating activities. And they need to be able, again, here's where human rights come in. The women need to be able to work. And before, in the communities where we worked, the men were not always allowing the women to work and to go to other communities and to sell things and be gone overnight, or even we've had women travel to other countries. And this was very unusual. The men would tell us we would never have allowed that to happen if we hadn't done the human right to work, and to know that everyone has the human right to work and make a living. And our wives have that right also. We, just to say that the classes are lots of fun. There's dancing and poetry. The poem I read in the beginning came out of a session where women expressed themselves through poetry, and others used theater, and others said, I'm going to do a dance for human rights, and others were looking at African proverbs that reinforced human rights. And they did beautiful songs also on democracy and the importance of people including everyone and not discriminating against anyone. And so this also makes people, it really wakens the creativity, and it also encourages people to come. They say, we don't have television, but the classes are like TV, because there's always something new that we're doing. And I just wanted to put that you see them with their human right. They're one of the posters there where they're discussing the right to voice one's opinions. And we found it was so important to divide women, and particularly into small groups, to help gain confidence in speaking out, because most of the women who came to our classes really had trouble. They were very nervous, and they had never really spoken out, particularly giving their ideas publicly. Mm-hmm. So this is, like I say, some of these classes are like rehearsals for real life. Mm-hmm. It allows them to practice first in the group, first coming out with their ideas, and then going in front of the small group of the class and sharing what their group, reporting back and representing their group. And then finally going out in front of the whole village and sharing information with the entire village. And just to sum up, because I was asked to give an overview of the program, I just wanted to say that some of the basic program principles are those of it being community owned and sustained. Really, we start what we call community management committees, mm-hmm. so that they feel that they are the ones organizing the classes, the activities, and if there's money that comes in from different kinds of activities they do, they're the ones who manage this. They learn, they get training on this, they get training on microcredit. It's very inclusive. We invite women, men, youth, elders. We work with religious leaders. Mm-hmm. We always train religious leaders before we even start the program, because as you can imagine, some people are very suspicious when we talk about human rights. And in some cases, we don't even say human rights. We say principles of human dignity, because mm-hmm. everyone agrees that it's good to have human dignity. But when we talk with the religious leaders, we align them with verses from the Quran. We align them with people's values. And then they see, of course, we promote these principles, these human rights principles, because they are the same as our deeper values. And that is what matters. Values, as one imam told me, practices change, values are eternal. And these human rights principles are eternal. So it's also strength-based, our program. We start where people are. We build on the positive. We go in saying, you're already doing amazing things. You have lots of wisdom. You have survival skills that are, that were hard for me. When I lived in a village for 3 years, I was amazed at how people could live under such difficult conditions. It's a foundation of human rights and responsibilities, the approach, holistic, because the subjects are interconnected. And then one other point that is so important is that we really do not try to impose things on people, rather give them choice. We present like the principle of human rights, and we say, what do you think? Do you agree? What are your hesitations around this? And then they allow people to discuss and themselves come to the conclusion that this is important. And then the HHH, the head, we give knowledge, information is so important. Practice, practical, hands-on. We do so many hands-on things, but above all, I think our program is really learner-centered, people-centered, and it touches people's hearts because people cry in our sessions. They share for the first time emotions and experiences that maybe they have never shared before. And so I think this is one of the reasons why our program really has an impact in the communities where we work.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. Thanks so much for giving us all that information, Molly. There's so many questions that come up as you're talking talking, but I'm going to try and minimize them so that we can give people the chance to ask at the end. I guess one thing that I was curious about is one of the things you touched on last was this fact that you'd go into diverse communities with different traditions, different religions, different practices, and you come in and you start talking about human rights. How do you do that? Like, where do you start? How do you introduce human rights into a community that otherwise may have never heard of it and may have its own sort of rules that it follows and might even be skeptical of human rights?
Okay, well, let me go back to where I was. Whoops, sorry. Play from current. Okay, let me just go down. And what happens is we start, it's again, sequential.
Yeah.
Once we have gone through and done the visioning and values, we go on to how are we going to organize, and that gets us into democracy. And when we get into and we don't impose democracy, we ask how they want to organize, and it turns out that they themselves come up with some of the fundamental elements of democracy. Mm-hmm. And they say, "Oh, this is what we call democracy," and they say, "Oh, really? We never knew what democracy was." Yeah, it's like, people coming together, the voice of the majority, but the respect for minority and respect for others, and associations, and even sometimes having a charter to like the Constitution for the country. But we can have an association that has its own rules that we set so that people know the guidelines. And then we look at and democracy at human rights. That part of democracy is respect for human rights. And we talk about, we use drawing a lot and we love that because people respond to these drawings. We talk about different human rights instruments. Now, we don't do it in a way that we want people to learn about, they can say, oh, the Universal Declaration, the Convention on the Rights of the Child, the CEDAW, or the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. But we want them to know that out there are instruments that are there to protect others, and they are part of a larger universe. In this little village where they are, these human rights are something that are endorsed and promoted by people around the world. And I think that makes a big difference, especially when they learn that their own country has ratified these instruments. Mm-hmm. And so we have taken from these human rights instruments, and here's an example. When they learn about the Convention on the Rights of Children, this was at a gathering of the community where a little girl talked about her having rights and that she was protected from this convention. And it just was really kind of important for people to learn that. Mm-hmm. But then we use the different principles that we present. We use posters and big drawings that they're big posters, mm-hmm. and that we give out in our training. And here you see, you may not, someone asked me, why don't you have a man hitting a woman to show violence? And I said, we did that, and it was a mistake. It was a mistake because when you show negative pictures, people put the negative pictures up on their wall, and then the men come in, they say, oh yeah, that's what we do. We hit women. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And, I'm not that violent. No, and a lot of people don't read. So if they just see a negative picture up on the wall, they say, oh, that's what they're promoting. Yeah. We're very careful to use positive images because, again, our program is looking forward. We're not looking to blame or shame. Mm-hmm. We're saying, come on, we've all made mistakes in the past. We're all thinking towards the future. We want to go to where we want to be. So we want to be free from all forms of violence. We want to be able to, this is an example of people solving a conflict. And so this is a positive way of solving problems is not through violence, but through dialogue. So we do that, and these are all the different human rights principles, or you can call them, a lot of times we just call them principles of human dignity. And all of these things we discuss, as I said, in each session. And again, the sessions are very lively. They do poems, they do theater. Every session is written out carefully, and they're very adaptable. We've done them in all 8 countries. But it's not so much that we give the content, rather we give the questions. You understand? It's a frame for how you get people discussing and talking about what that means in their own community and what the violations are. And what does this mean for men? What does it mean for women? What does it mean for children? All that is very important, that they be the ones who adapt this to their very own context. So, and just to show you, these are some of the people from our training sessions. We do 10-day trainings in our Tostan Training Center. And you see up in the left-hand corner, a Maasai woman showing the human right to health. And in Kenya, you see Tony with Men Engage doing human rights training with the same posters. In Somalia, they changed the drawings because, of course, the people dress differently in Somalia. And so you see a high school student there. He said to me when I went to visit in Arabsio, in the community where he lives, he said, you know, I'm in a high school where nobody knows about human rights. So after every class session, I organize a group of students who come together and I share with them all of the human rights. So the posters really are, they seem to be used now by so many people, which is really exciting. We've even made booklets so that they can have all of them together, so that what we encourage is for the participants to reach out and share with others. You have the children's rights at the bottom. That was for a special module we do on early childhood development. And then the others are the booklets that they can use to review and then share with other people in other communities. And we do regular radio programs where they review and we include calls from community participants who discuss some of these human rights. And that has also been very powerful. In fact, our evaluations have shown that many control communities would say that they already knew about human rights when we did evaluations. And they said, well, where did you didn't do the Tosan program? They said, no, but we listened to the Tosan program on the radio. And they're always doing a human right. And I know, so it was like, okay, so we need to keep doing that kind of sharing on the radio. And then, of course, we do the sharing. This is our training center in Chess, where we share and do 10 days for activists and other NGO leaders who want to come and learn just key aspects, not the whole 3-year program, but different aspects. We don't have time to go into all of that today, but I did want to emphasize the human rights training. And just to say, there's just the end of the program where this little girl was in a community where her mother was cut. She went through FGC. She was married at 13. She had her first child at 14. She never went to school. And this is her granddaughter, who is not cut now because the village decided to abandon female genital cutting and child marriage. She's in high school now. And it's just to show that in one generation, you can really make a change. And I just can't even tell you enough on this important day, International Human Rights Day, that I always give the credit to human rights. That this just was a revolution in our program, a very joyful revolution, I must say, because I'd done the program 8 years before we introduced human rights. And we never had these results, these incredible results of people standing up, abandoning harmful practices, ending violence against girls and women, and just with the confidence because they knew their human rights and they knew how to apply them because they practiced and rehearsed over a good amount of time. So thank you.
That's incredibly inspiring. And as you obviously place a lot of emphasis on like the use of creativity and dance and theater in delivering or developing this knowledge in people, I was wondering, how do you encourage creativity in people or populations who are easily embarrassed or ashamed? We face this in our classes where a new teacher would come in and try to play a game with the students, and the students are older or adults who have gone through a very specific kind of education or none at all, or who are culturally not able to express themselves in the kinds of ways that, she might have had in mind for them. And so I was wondering, have you experienced such challenges in your work?
Yeah. Wow. Yes. We had that problem when I first started in the community where I worked. I found that women particularly were very open to these kind of methodologies that we were using that I thought were good for learning, because I had learned with those methods, with games and with songs and dancing, and people made fun of the community because they were doing this. And I was even surprised, because it was a very religious village, that the village chief allowed it. But he called me and he told me he understood that people were learning like they had never learned before. They were doing things that they had never done before. But it was a problem. People made fun of them. And then they saw lots of results. They saw them doing things too. And then gradually, what we ended up doing is talking about the different houses of knowledge that exist. There is formal education, and there is religious education. There is life education, informal, where you learn to braid hair and do cooking and drive a car. But our education, we say, if you can trust us, this education will quickly lead you to have knowledge and skills that you might have taken you 5 years. And 1 year, we can give you the knowledge and skills you need that you might have taken 5 or 6 years to learn. And gradually, as people started seeing the results from the program, and I didn't go through all those, but there are many results that occurred in the communities. And I welcome you all to come to Senegal and visit and see. And the people, I don't think they actually would tell you, oh, it's because we learned human rights, but it's through what they're talking about and the confidence they have. And when they talk to you about what was before and what is now, they're proud to say, we sing, we dance, and this is a wonderful way to share knowledge and information and learn together. Yeah.
And you had also mentioned visioning as a core part of your approach, and you'd also mentioned that you use it to sort of discuss things that might be sensitive, so sort of social norms that might be taboo in some cultures, about social norms and visioning against them. So I was wondering, how do you build trust in your participants to empower them to speak freely and openly about their vision for a future that might not fit the inherited or entrenched roles that their society has given them?
That doesn't happen overnight. And you build confidence, and that takes time. And, we always say that one of the things that it takes is patience and perseverance. We go into a community, we don't start talking about those things right away, but when you vision, people say they want good health in the community. We want well-being for our community. And so what does that mean for you? What does it mean for you? Well, if you have good health, when they do the human rights and they learn they have the right to health, but they have certain responsibilities, and then they go on later on in the year, I said they do hygiene and health, and they learn that there are practices. It's only after they've been in the program for 8 months when they actually discuss female genital cutting, just for example. You don't start out and come in and say, oh, we're here to talk to you about female genital cutting, or no, it's not at all about that. It's along the way, and it's sequential, and it's what we call scaffolding. It's gradually, getting people first to have confidence in their ability to achieve things they've never dreamed of changing, and take on new roles they never dreamed of having, is what you were saying before, the capacity to aspire. And then being able to go on to other roles, and as they gain confidence, these small gains, as they start doing activities, cleaning up the village, and people say, "Wow, it's visible. Look at what's going on in that village," and they get reinforcement. And it's through those kind of activities that gradually you get to a point where you can talk about very deep issues, and then people sort of, what I call, it's a deliberation between practices that may harm people, that are social norms, that are expected practices, and their deeper values. And they say, wait a minute, if our values are health, and we're doing a practice that harms, like marrying our girls at 13, and then they have a child at 14, and their bodies are not developed enough, and some of our daughters have died, or some of them have had fistula. We need to stop this. And they have the confidence, because of the human rights they've learned, they have the right to speak out, they have the right to defend good health, and they come together, they organize. And then what we say with social norms is then it does take them reaching out. The rest of the people in their group, in their because of course in Africa the group is so important. The intermarrying group, they can't stand up alone. They reach out, and with the information they get, the new information they get, and they reach out to their relatives and to the people who matter to them, and they're the ones who actually do the social mobilization and the advocacy. And they advocate not only with their relatives, but even at the district council. They start working with their elected officials. And the women in our program, we've had thousands of women who have become district councilors now, and who are advocating for their rights at the district level. That's what's really exciting.
That's great. And there's a lot of similarities, I think, in terms of the kinds of populations that we work with here in the refugee camps, in terms of different ethnicities, different religions, different traditions, all coming from places where human rights are not a topic of conversation necessarily. But one other added sort of complexity is, I mean, there are many, but I'll choose this one, is the fact that in our context, the management of refugee camps undermines people's autonomy. So basic things like when you eat, what you wear, whether or not your child goes to school, these decisions are largely out of your hands when you become a refugee, despite you being completely capable of making them. So have you ever applied the Tostan model to a community like that, a community that lacks autonomy?
Yes, and I mean, I hate to say this, but I mean, we work in 9 prisons in Senegal, where it's similar, where the decisions that are made are definitely made by the guards in the prison. But in that context, as I said, we form a community management committee. We do the same thing in the prisons. And that committee, then we negotiate with the guards. We negotiate, and we equip the community management committee with the skills that they need to defend the rights of the people and be the spokespeople. They're elected by the people that are trusted in that community. And the community these people come from different countries in the prisons, different ethnic groups, and yet there's always the people that they trust more than others, and those are the people that form that community management committee, the prison management committee. And they have different commissions, one on health, one on education, one on income generating activities, because they do income generating activities in the prison. We do training for them, but based on what they want to do and what things that we support them and teaching them how to do a feasibility study, and so that they then realize that they could make money off this, and they have made quite a bit of money, so that and the human rights really made a huge difference in the prisons also, because it really it motivated them and gave them a sort of new hope about integration. So I do think we've not worked in a refugee camp, but I do think in a place where people cannot move so freely, and coming together and being able to discuss about very meaningful topics, because it really allows you a safe space, a nurturing space where people can come together. That really it affects people deeply, and it gives them hope, and it gives them the desire to work together and to organize and to see that there are other possibilities, you know?
Yeah. No, I think it's definitely something that we can learn more from you, and as we begin to think about how to test it in our context, because it's completely necessary and adaptable. So thank you very much for giving us this insight into the incredible work you've been doing thus far. I'm going to open up the question and answer session now. I see some questions coming in from the audience, so I will read them out to you. So the first question is Molly, are you invited into these communities? Like, is Tostan invited into these communities, or do you look for communities that you think you could have an impact on?
Actually, we when we started out, we would go to a community and we would explain to them exactly what our program was about. We say we don't give money. We don't build buildings, we build minds. We support you on achieving the goals of your community by giving you knowledge and skills and some support. At one point, we do support them with income generating activities, but they don't really know that until the first year is done. But then what happened is, in any country we go into, when other people go into the village and they see the differences in the community, and they see the way people are active and proactive, and they see just visibly, they see a clean community, they see income generating gardens, they see latrines being built, they see that people have really, and that they're managing it themselves. And they ask for the program. We have a list of so many communities that invite us in when they see what the results are. And this is an answer to your question before, that people are willing to try the other methods when they see what the results are. So at this point, we have a long list of people who want us to come into the community. Our new strategy really is now working on a district level and working with the district council. And what we found is, in our training with the district council, is they don't know what their roles and responsibilities are. They really have been on the council some for 5 years, and they don't really know. And learning what decentralization is and what the responsibilities they have to the communities, and trying to get new cooperation and collaboration for sustaining it over time. And so we're working with communities within those districts, and we're choosing them now, and that ones, but always the ones who want. We tell them, these are the issues we discuss. We do not impose anything, but we will discuss health issues. And if you're against family planning, or if you're against abandoning SGC, we would never impose that on you. Who are we to impose such a thing on you? But we will discuss those things, and then they choose. And then, and so they, you know, generally we do get lots of requests in the countries where we work. And in other countries.
That's encouraging. The next question, I guess I'll read it out, and then you can say whether you want to discuss about the current situation, or maybe like 30 years ago or 20 years ago when this process was quite new. But what are the most recurrent challenges that you face or had faced before when starting working in a new community?
Okay, yeah, I made a lot of mistakes in the beginning. When I lived in a village for 3 years, and when I did, the program was written. What? I
was saying it's the only way to learn. Mistakes.
Yeah.
There's a lot.
So I was listening to the people. They said they wanted a garden, so I just assumed this is Africa, so everybody will work in the garden, just to give you an example. And so, the first day everybody came, and we got the garden, we got it funded, and everybody came and worked and planted and everything. And then, the second week, half the people came. The third week, 2 people came. And, I went to them and I said, what's going on? You wanted a garden. And they said, yes, we wanted the garden, but, well, do you really want to know? And I said, well, yes. And they said, well, this isn't how we organize. And I said, well, how do you organize? And they said, well, we do rows, and every family has a row. And each we don't just everybody do. It doesn't work with us. And I said, well, why didn't you tell me? And they said, well, you didn't ask. Yeah. You didn't ask. And that's why I emphasize it's so important to let people, to build on what people are doing, the way they already organize. They're great organizers. Oh my God. And just follow and pull out from what they're doing, saying, look, you do this and this and this, and all you have to do is to use that for the project that you're doing. So, I guess the listening is so critical. Why we ask what vision, you want. And then also we made a mistake in the beginning. We used women's rights, and we did children's rights separately, women's rights and children's rights. And that was a huge mistake. Okay. You can imagine why.
Tell us.
As we did women's rights, the men were very suspicious and were not very cooperative, and were, and we said, okay, this is our fault because, you need to be inclusive. It's so important when you're talking about community well-being. You want to involve everyone. And we realized that we had even the they even closed some centers in the beginning. And so we stopped in 2000. We sat down and we rewrote everything. We put human rights at the very beginning. And we said everyone's human rights, men, women, children, young, old, babies. We all have human rights. So then if you have your human rights respected, then they should have their, it was okay. You can't imagine. It was totally different. Yeah. So that was a challenge. And the other big challenge we had was the religious leaders who were very suspicious and that was a real problem. And it was because they didn't understand what we were doing. We said, okay, we've got to change. Whenever we have a problem like that, we say it's not them, it's us. So we started doing these 10-day religious leader trainings to say, we need you, and we want you to understand what the program is about, and if it could be helpful to you, we would like you to be really at the forefront of this movement for well-being, because this is what religion is all about. All religions want health and family and unity and peace and security and well-being in the family and community and country. So we work together. And when we did that and did those trainings, changed everything. And so, we've learned a lot of lessons, and the hard way sometimes. No, because we've been through a lot of things.
Well, you've achieved a lot, so well done. And another question, is the realization of a shared access to basic human rights enough for cross-cultural communications and alliances to be formed? For example, neighboring communities who would not otherwise have had a relationship. Is this something that you have witnessed? Did human rights help?
Human rights has been amazing. What happens in our program is when the participants come, we say, will you commit to adopting others? And they do that commitment in the beginning. So they always share what they learn in the family first with, they adopt either maybe their co-wife or their sister-in-law or, someone in the family or a friend. And then as they gain confidence, they start going together to other communities, and they actually form peace communities. We teach mediation, and they go to other communities. They share human rights, what they've learned, and they get people involved in the conversation. And if there are problems, and if so many of the results that we've had in the communities are related to long-lasting problems in these communities, between families, between communities. and because we built on already there's terrific mediation skills, but women weren't involved. Mm-hmm. And so we then got people to realize how important it was to include women, and then also added some new mediation skills to their already, big toolkit that they have, which they really appreciated, I think, and that were very effective in resolving conflicts in other neighboring communities. So and now they're actually called upon by other communities to go, do conflict resolution within those communities, and even at a district level.
Wow, that's also really good. It's like there's a lot of inspiring things to hear from you, because I think a lot of the challenges that we face are things that seem insurmountable in that moment. Like, for example, there are inter-ethnic tensions between the refugees, They may have all fled similar violence and oppression and disasters, but it doesn't make them one unified group. And within them, there's a lot of, tensions. And so we try to do all our activities mixed to try to encourage this idea that, look, we're all the same, you're all students. But I think this, as you mentioned, teaching human rights or topics like this really does require it to be in mother tongue, but it doesn't mean that it would, cause divisions. It actually would probably help both each other better.
It really unites people, because, you start with, what unites us,
Yeah.
Why are we different from a table? And then what is it that we all need, and what are our basic needs, and what, and what do we all need besides just physical, but even, love and respect and friendship and spirituality, all those things and we realize that we have so much in common. What we have in common is 99%. What divides us is maybe 1%, maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, we do have traditions, but to learn to listen and understand others and have empathy. We do a lot on empathy also. Mm-hmm. To try to put ourselves in the other person's shoes, and have lots of exercises on that, in the program, so that people then working with their children to have more empathy, because, we work a lot on violence and corporal punishment with children and with violence against women. So those are empathy is really an important skill to teach in the classes.
Yeah, and there's a question here from Lotta. I think in Sally Armstrong's book, I don't know who that is. I suppose you might know who Sally Armstrong is.
I do, yeah. She's a Canadian woman who came to Senegal several times.
Okay.
Visited yeah.
So apparently in her book, she had written that through Tostan, there was a theater performance that helped the community abolish FMG. How do you think theater played a role in this change?
Yes, she witnessed, we call it female genital cutting. I mean, I know a lot of people call it mutilation, but the villagers asked us to say cutting because they felt like mutilation made them look like horrible people who were cruel and barbaric. And they said, we cut our daughters for them to succeed, not for them to have problems. I mean, we're not cruel people. But anyway, so the theater was something the villagers did to share with the rest of the community in an indirect way, to express something that was difficult for them to otherwise express to people directly. Mm-hmm. I talk a lot about in our program about doing things implicitly rather than explicitly. We don't go for direct confrontation. Rather, we use methods that don't directly, blame somebody, shame somebody, but the women talk for the first time about what happens to them through the theater. Mm-hmm. And they invite the men to come to that, and they see what happens and how it affects them through the play. Mm-hmm. And then there's a discussion afterwards, and the men say, well, we just never knew that. We didn't know this. You've kept this from us. Is this true?
Oh, okay.
And then a woman will say, well, our daughter who died, I told you that she had, tetanus, but she actually died because of the cutting, which led her to have tetanus, but I never told you that because it's kept pretty much among the women when this happens. So what it does is the theater and these other methods allow people to bring up issues in a way that is non-confrontational, which is also a very African way of dealing with problems, that you want to bring them up, but not to blame and confront people and be aggressive, as is sometimes, it's a different way of doing things than in other countries, for example.
Have you ever done it that way? Like, is this something you learned to not be confrontational?
I as an outsider, when I first came here, I was so careful. Who am I to come in and tell somebody, even if I don't agree or I'm concerned about what I see, who am I to judge? You have to understand, you have to go deeper and say, these are wonderful, kind, generous, open people, welcoming. They are not bad people. So there's something I'm not understanding, and you need to go always deeper, listen carefully, and then realize it's very difficult to stop certain practices that are social norms, that are expectations. And even if a woman wants to stop this, it's hard, because then she will be rejected and ostracized by her whole community, and she doesn't want that. So I've always been extremely careful and I've seen also that it doesn't work. I've seen other people go in and try to go in a 2-hour session or a 2-week session, go in with films that, shock and, that really criticize and blame, shame, this is horrible, this is people, insinuating that people who do this. And I just see the reaction, and that it's like, oh, you don't understand, Yeah. They sort of closes doors to dialogue, I always say. This kind of confrontational. It's what we call psychological reactance. Anytime you try to tell somebody, stop doing this, this is bad, they immediately want to continue doing it. It's as if people forget their own psychology when they were growing up. You don't want people to tell you not to do something.
Okay, and maybe one final question before we wrap up. How do images help you communicate the complex message of human rights?
Yeah, that we were confronted with that when we started working on it. It wasn't easy, but it's not that we don't expect the image. It's a great question, but we don't expect the image to say the human right. We don't show it and say, what does this mean? What is this human right? We don't ever expect that. What we say is, this image for us represents the human right to be free from all forms of discrimination. And what do you see in this picture? And they say, oh, we see, people of different color, of different heights, of different body size, of different clothes, different hair, different abilities and disabilities. And so what does this mean? And, and what unites us and what divides us? And is it important, this hair color, the body size? What is really important? And we ask, it leads into a discussion on, discrimination, and what is discrimination, and in what areas do we find discrimination, and have you ever been discriminated against? And this is where people talk about how hurtful discrimination is. But then we turn around and say, have you ever discriminated against someone? And why did you discriminate against someone? And, and then discuss how we can encourage no more discrimination.
Yeah.
Because it is so hurtful. But, this is but that picture opens the door to the dialogue. It's not that it tells everything through the image, but, and people like the drawings, they just do. And they're not sophisticated. They're done by a villager who himself, and people somehow relate to these simple, colorful pictures that, that they use in Nigeria, in Kenya, in Tanzania, in Somalia, and even we had training participants from Greenland
Wow.
But now she didn't. She changes the pictures, of course, to better relate. But she did the video exercises and all that, with the Inuits, the Inuit people in Greenland.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you so much, Molly, for sharing your incredible work with us today. I'm inspired. I'm sure everybody else is too, and then definitely full of energy to adapt your learnings in some way, to our work and to our context where people really, really need this. So thank you for taking the time to speak to us and celebrating Human Rights Day with us. And thank you to everybody for joining us today.
I see that there are participants from our training who are on there, and
there's quite a representation.
Welcome to all of them, and they've been doing wonderful work sharing in Nigeria.
There's quite a few of your participants here saying hello and sending nice little messages, so that's super nice to see. Thank you very much once again, and I hope that this will be the first of many conversations that we at least host on human rights, and I hope to definitely speak to you again in the future, Molly. As the slide says, the work continues, so if you want to get more information about Tostan, the work that they do, you can see their details up on the screen, and the same with us. If you'd like any more information about what we do, any questions at all, feel free to send us a message on our social media or on our website. And we will be sharing this talk on our social media. Also, we'll share it with your team as well, Molly, in the coming week. Thank you so much.
Yeah, great. You're going to share the recording?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Great.
All right.
Thank you so much. Thanks to everybody. Goodbye, and happy International Human Rights Day.
Happy Human Rights Day. Bye-bye.
Bye.